the issues around your green card, your wife's non-dom tax status. These are going to be issues that Labour are going to be able to use against the Conservatives in the next election about character of the Prime Minister, aren't they? They're problems in your closet.
Well, they're all out there, and we've discussed them, and we addressed them in Easter. I referred myself, as you know, to Lord Geit, who wrote and described my behaviour and conduct as meticulous, and there were absolutely no conflicts or anything like that. And my wife made her own statement at the time, and I respect her decisions to do that, and I fully respect her decisions going forward. And of course, I will continue to ensure that we have very high standards in public office. That's what people rightly should expect from their leaders. That's what I will provide.
Former Chancellor Nadim Zahawi is under fire over a tax settlement with HMRC.
The BBC's Chris Mason understands that while Chancellor, he paid around £5 million to settle a tax dispute, which included paying a penalty. The Guardian reports that 30% of the overall amount, £1 million, was the penalty in question.
It's a settlement that relates to shares in an offshore company, and one he hasn't ruled out being reached during his time as Chancellor.
Why didn't Zahawi get tax advice when he received 27 million quid? Because if he had, I'm sure it would have told him there's tax on that. And if he had got tax advice and his advisor had merely gotten it wrong, well, that happens sometimes, but you don't then pay 30% penalties.
There are questions that need answering, and that's why I've asked our independent advisor to get to the bottom of everything, to investigate the matter fully.
It appears as well as though, when you go back over the chronology of statements that Nadim Zahawi has made, the public statements he's made since these allegations first surfaced, that he may not have been completely candid in his responses.
Zahawi can't stay as Tory party chair. The very idea that he can be discussing and negotiating his own tax affairs with the body that he's supposed to be running, everybody knows it's wrong. He clearly isn't going to resign, and so the Prime Minister needs to show some leadership.
I think it's very difficult for Nadim Zahawi to stay on as chairman of the Conservative Party. I think it's inevitable that he'll be forced to resign at some point in time. I could be wrong, but I've seen this pattern played out again and again and again. And what, in the face of all of this, does Rishi Sunak as leader do? Well, he palms it all off to Laurie Magnus, his new ethics advisor, who will investigate, which means the saga now goes on for weeks and weeks unless Zahawi is removed. My question to you, is Rishi Sunak a leader?
Rishi Sunak does not have the political or public capital to make the types of decisions he needs to make. He's very short on allies within the party. He's unable to push through his own, well, I'm not clear what his legislative agenda is, but absolutely he should be asking Nadim Zahawi to stand down.
And I think he looks very, very unsure of his footing. And I think this is going to bring them huge trouble when Zahawi inevitably has to resign.
This government will have integrity, professionalism and accountability at every level. The government's not best placed to decide which companies should and shouldn't be successful. What the government can do is support that. But ultimately, if those companies are going to be successful, they need to attract money from private investors as well. Thank you.
You were filmed earlier without a seatbelt on, Prime Minister, in your car. Would you address that for us?
I wondered if I could get your view on the fact that the Prime Minister has received a fixed penalty notice for not wearing a seat belt. It's the second time he's had a fixed penalty notice from police. Do you think that Rishi Sunak should consider his position?
I think it just makes Rishi Sunak look ridiculous.
What he accidentally did was announce that he was breaking the law at the time by not wearing a seatbelt in the back of a car, a crime which would see an ordinary Joe facing up about a £220 fine unless there were mitigations. So I think what we have here is a question about double standards, a question about hypocrisy.
To see you, Boris. Welcome. How are you?
Very, very good. Very, very good. Great to see you. It's an absolute honour to be here again. You're too kind and you're too generous to time on a Sunday. Nice to see you again. Nice to meet you. Nice to see you. Nice to see you again. Nice to see you. Oh my God, you're all here. I can't believe it. Can't believe it. How are you? Nice. Back, thank you very, very much.
The worst thing I could do is promise you a bunch of things that sound great, but ultimately just make the situation worse.